Welcome back. So we are currently learning about exceptions in Python. So in the previous section, we learned about built-in exception in Python. So today we'll learn about user-defined exception. So in the previous section, we learned about different built-in exception and why it was important to handle exception. Okay. But sometimes we may need to create our own exception that serves our purpose, right? Like let's define an exception, user-defined exception. In Python, we can define our user-defined exception by saying class, we can say custom error, and this will extend the exception class. Okay, so here we can have some body, and then we can use this try. So here we have some block of code, and then we can accept. And here we can say custom error. Okay, so if you see here, so this is a custom error or user-defined error. A custom exception or a user-defined exception has to inherit this exception class. So this custom error is a user-defined error which inherits from the exception class. Okay. So when we are developing a large Python program, it is a good practice to place all the user-defined exception that are programmed in a separate file. So this is how the user-defined exception would look like. So let's try to create a user-defined exception. We'll take an user input, and if the age of that user is less than 18, then in that case, we will throw an exception. Okay. So let's define the exception. Let's say class invalid age exception. And we have to inherit the exception class. Okay, so here we'll just simply say pass. Okay, so let's use try, and let's say user age, we'll say equal to int, and here we could say input, and we'll say how old are you. Okay, and here we'll say if user age is less than 18, we'll say raise invalid age exception. Okay, else we'll say print you are permitted to do some works. And here what we'll say, we'll accept and we'll catch the invalid age exception, and then we'll print exception occurred, invalid age. Okay, so here we have created a user-defined exception. So we have said invalid age exception. It inherits the exception class. And then here we have taken the user age from the input. And if the user age is less than 18, then in that case, we are throwing this exception, or we are raising this exception. We can throw an error by using this raise keyword. Else, if the age is not less than 18, then we say we are permitted to do some work, and we are catching that exception. So let's run this code. So let's say I am 10 years old. So it says exception occurred, invalid age. So let's run this code again. Let's try to give 19. Then it says you are permitted to do some work. Okay. So in this example, we have defined the custom exception invalid age exception by creating a new class that is derived from this exception. And when the user age is less than 18, we are throwing the exception, or we are raising the exception. And then when an exception is occurred, the rest of the block of code will be skipped. So let's try to customize this invalid age exception. So if you want to customize this, we can have the constructor of this class, and let's say init, it will take self. Okay, and then it will take a message, and the message would be basically, let's say you must be 18 years and above. Okay, so here what we can say is, also let's take the age, say age, and then we'll say self.age is equal to age. Okay, and here what we can say is, we can have this customizes this exception by calling the super. Okay, so for that we can say super. So we are calling the parent class exception, and in that case I will call the init of the parent, and here I will pass the message. So here what I can say, let's say self.message is equal to message. So in this case I can pass the self.message. Okay, so now it says that you are not permitted to do some work. Okay, so if I don't write this, let's say let's not have this try catch block. Let me just comment this, and let me copy, and let me uncomment it. So, and let me remove all the try block. I don't really need it for now. Let's reindent it, and then let's run this code. So let's say I am 17 years old. Okay, so here, why is that? Because I don't have this age. I need to pass this age. So maybe I can say here, let's say user age. So let me run this code again. Let me say 17. So it says that invalid age exception, you must be 18 years and above. So in this case, we have overridden the constructor of the exception class to accept our own custom arguments. Okay. So it has taken this salary and message, and we are throwing the message based on that. Okay. So the constructor of the parent exception class is called manually with the self.message arguments using the super. So we are calling this manually. Okay. So far we have learned how we can create a user-defined exception. To create a user-defined exception, we need to inherit the exception class. We have learned how to create an invalid age exception and simply do nothing, like simply pass. So let me just copy and paste it here. So you will have to, let me comment this. And in this case, we just had pass. So here we were just using the exception class, whatever it was doing, we were okay with that. But in this case, we were sending our custom message as well. So to send the custom message, we need to call the super init and with the custom message which we want to send. So here we have a message called you must be 18 years and above for this particular exception. And now when the user inputs the age which is less than 18, then in that case we are throwing this invalid age exception by passing the age. So this is it from this session. I hope you find this session helpful and hope to see you in next one.